Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shooting Out Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Baxter, and today is episode 17 of the series. And today we've got an awesome guest for you. We've got an audio artist. We've got Mike Brown on the show today. How's it going, man?
I'm great. No, thanks for having me, man. How are you getting on?
I'm good. I'm just surprised that we're already in 17 episodes so far, so thank you so much for coming on. It really means a lot.
Not a problem.
So before we get into the podcast, as usual, everybody, so we're going to be talking about the main topic of student education, as always, and I want to talk about the importance of audio in art and hearing Mike's background and so forth, and highlight his journey. But if you're new to the Student Art Podcast, as always, we are live on 9 other platforms alongside YouTube. We are live on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and finally Stitcher. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to smash the subscribe button. It'll be much appreciated. We've recently just hit over 1,000 subscribers, and it'll be great to continue on this journey. So, and then the other trend that I've been doing on the podcast is making sure all artists are introducing their links in the description below. So make sure to share them. And what I'll do is include them in the next podcast and give you guys a shout out and give you some feedback as well if you're needing it. So let's just get straight into the podcast. So thanks once again, Mike, for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey, what you do, and so forth. Like, for example, 4J Studios and a lot of different other things. So, as always, man, we just start off with a big question. Tell us a wee bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my kind of journey into game audio, which I think is probably quite common for most audio guys, was through music.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a kid, like 12, I started playing the guitar.
Awesome.
And I was one of those obsessive sort of weird kids, like sort of loners who all I did, man, was play guitar most of the day.
Cool. Can't go wrong with that. I play guitar as well.
Yeah, so I got super into music. Sort of started gigging, doing guitar stuff, and then like I found that I wasn't actually enjoying the performing aspect of it too much.
Mm-hmm.
I just enjoyed writing it and sort of learning it. So I kind of came to a point where I was like, I didn't know what to do with it.
Okay.
My girlfriend was like, I'm going to go do a jewelry course in Dundee. And I think it was her, Kate, who said, or she found the course on Abertay for Sound and Music for Games. And I was like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's when it clicked.
Yeah, it did. So came to Abertay, and that's pretty much where I started properly getting into game audio. I had intentions of going there to do or just learn music for games, but I've totally just fallen in love with the whole idea of audio and sound design for games in general.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So how long have you now been doing? Is it 6 years? In terms of, so you started, I assume, because we were in the same year when we were at university. So I assume, was it 6 years now since you started university? Is that roughly about that, or maybe a wee bit longer?
I think I might have been in the year below you.
All right, okay.
Because the Sound and Music for Games thing was a third year course, so I went straight into like
right.
third year. So I was below you. You were my superior for the Disney thing.
Because I remember when we were doing obviously when you did the Disney project.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I was in my 4th year at that time, so were you in third? You must have been in 3rd year.
Yeah, I was just started my 2nd semester.
Gee
like,
whiz.
ever.
I did not know that. Right? Okay, fair enough. Well, you're great at what you do, and it was awesome working with you as well.
I know it was. Yeah, it was great.
It was just such a, like, obviously I'm trying not to get off tangent, but because it's one of the things we'll also talk about later on. Because
Sure.
Just give everyone a wee bit of context of what we're talking about here is me and Mike had the privilege to work on a project together with Disney Research, and basically we had to create this. It was almost like a VR experience, shall we say?
Yeah.
And this is like one of the main things having Mike on today is I think, like, for example, like, to me, like, it's what I said to you on Facebook, like, one of the main things I think it gets overlooked in a way or not as appreciated, but I think artists just like as like people who are more creative in terms of like people who are, well, not more creative, but people who do like environment art, concept art, like, I think they have to start with kind of like using music a bit more. I know that sounds very weird to say, but it's like trying to find
I agree.
like
Yeah,
how to
totally.
like utilize it in a way, if you know what I mean, and try and
Sure.
bring it more into the artwork. Because like one of the main things that I've said in many podcasts that I've done is that, like, for example, I don't really for example, like when I'm making my show reel or whatever I'm making, it's the music that brings it to life. It's what makes it feel
Yeah.
like it's like a final piece, if that makes sense.
No, totally, man. I think like art, art, visuals in general, and sound are completely intertwined.
Hmm.
Like, sure, you can have one without the other, but when they're put together, you get like that. I know you get the best out of both. Like they work very well together. I think
Definitely.
you need both.
Because like even like a small thing, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's like a lot of showreels, like for example, environment artists, they've been fully criticized for having like choosing bad audio. I know it's a small thing,
Mm,
but if you have like this crazy music or these wrong sound effects with your environment that you're creating, it can just destroy a piece.
sure.
So, as always on the Shooter podcast, obviously we've talked about Mike's background and so forth. It'll be great to talk about, I guess, just like how we can maybe cover like the main topics of student education, so like the four main questions I was talking to you about.
Yeah. No,
So we'll go back
sounds
and
good.
forth between the student side and the art side, if that's okay. But
Yeah.
since I've already given you the questions, I guess we'll just start off with the first one when it comes to student education. So what do you wish you learned when studying at university when it comes to sound?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I had to think about it quite a bit, to be honest.
Okay.
Because I mean, generally, I think like I'm not sure. Do you like? Are you wanting me to answer it as if like what did I wish I had done differently, or just as a student, what should like?
I would
Yeah.
say, obviously, so when it comes to like what you learn, so I guess you as a person, but also like any other things you think overall students would benefit from, if that makes sense.
Cool. I think the main one, and this applies to all departments outside of audio as well, is just get involved with game jams and just get to know your students because I think the job of a game developer is to work as a team.
Hmm.
And because I was obviously quite new to sound design, so my focus was on learning the technical aspects,
Okay.
whereas what are like the actual more practical ones that employers look for are do you know how to work as a team? Because that is a completely different skill set in its own is teamwork skills.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's something not to the um, like Abertay are very good at encouraging teamwork, but I think personally my focus was on learning sound design skills and being just the audio guy
Okay.
as opposed to like how does like audio is quite funny in terms of like game teams.
Hmm.
Like I think
Well, like social wise, or as in just like what do you mean?
um like sort of pipeline stuff because I think it's quite common to think of audio as this post production thing. We kind of
Yeah.
you build a game, then you stick it in at the end.
Oh,
But
I see what you mean. Okay, continue.
yeah,
I got tons of information there. Right, on you go.
yeah. So like, it's fair. I think it's super important to to be that active team member from the start, even if you're working with cubes in Unity.
Hmm.
Like understanding both on a implementation level and design level. You need to do that at the start.
Like an original block out, just to have like that foundation kind of set.
Yeah, I'd say like in person, I'd say about 30% of game audio is the recording, making the assets part.
Hmm.
The seven like the extra 70% is how do you get this working in game where it actually sounds good? You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to just slap in a bunch of footsteps and
Of
some
course.
ambience, but how do you take that a step further? How do you make that feel like the players in that environment and it's not just kind of like you know what I mean? It's like a
Hmm.
the integration side of sound design is a very complicated one, and it's like it's one of those things where I think game audio is easy to do okay, but it's extremely complicated to do
To do it right.
professionally or
Yeah.
yeah to do it well.
Because like,
Um,
so do when it comes to, I guess, like the learning aspect when it comes to like what you wish you studied. So you're saying probably, obviously, first of all, more teamwork projects,
hmm,
more, I guess, early on understanding of pipeline and how to work with other areas.
yes,
Because obviously we had the privilege at Abertay to work in our third year project and also through the Disney project, the fourth year, to work as a team. However, it's a lot of things that like it's a common thing that's now coming up that I've realized through these podcasts that more teamwork early on is vital.
Yes.
Because I think naturally, I think you'll agree with this as well. I'm not sure what it's been like when it comes to 4J, but it's like obviously you're instantly being thrown into a team, and you have to be able to obviously bounce ideas off each other and collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, you need.
on you go.
Sorry, go on. I was going to say, yeah. As well as that, you need to understand how each department works as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need to know how the animators work. I need to know how the artists work, just because like everything someone does on a team impacts the other person. So having that
Yeah.
knowledge of how each and every person works is, like you say, like vital learning processes.
Like that. Like that's also the crazy thing, because what like this is the thing, like I don't realize when it comes to like how big a scale audio is. So audio is everything, and I think a lot of people
Thank
like
you.
need to realize that like it is literally everything. Like for example, when you're doing the Foley, like you have to cover obviously just like the common sounds, like for assets and stuff. But then you've got like the weather, then you've got environments, then you've got characters, you've got like voiceovers.
UI.
There's
Yes.
UI. It's
Yeah.
this goes
Yes.
on beyond
Yeah.
belief. It's crazy how much stuff you guys have to cover.
It's actually it's a blessing and a curse, because like
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, but we get to put our hands in all these different pies of the game. We get to, because you hear stories of AAA artists who've spent like years on a horse, just one horse.
Wow,
you know,
jeez.
but like audio wise, you like you said, you have to think of everything, and then you need to balance all that as well. You
So
need to make that not confused.
so when it comes to, I guess, the question of like studying at university, so alongside teamwork, obviously learning to understand that you're going to be tackling a lot of different fields and stuff. So would you say, beside these things, is there any other things that you've realized through just your personal experience outside of teamwork? Like, is there anything like that's mainly clicked when it comes to like certain things that you maybe want to learn when it comes to maybe like the software side of things, or is there any like technical stuff that you think you maybe wish you learned?
Um, I think, or at least for my course, what it was pretty good at teaching the technicals.
Okay.
We did a bit of implementation. What we didn't do, which I kind of wish we did more, was doing work with game engines straight away.
Okay.
Because like it was kind of assumed that you had the ability to record your own sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the focus of the course was getting it to work in game. But I think it came, or at least for me, it felt like it came a little bit late,
Okay.
because I didn't touch Unity till like almost halfway through my course.
Well,
I
like
think.
in like second, third, end of second year, start of third year, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't understand how game engines worked,
Mm-hmm.
which is a huge problem if you're trying to convince someone how to use audio well, if you don't know it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like I think that's the thing when it comes to like it's what you said earlier about obviously like you guys have so much things you have to cover, and if you don't have the foundations covered, you're pretty much screwed in a way, in the sense that like for example when you first come across Unreal, when you first come across Unity, like there's these two major platforms that you're gonna have to learn, or at least learn the fundamentals in order to get your work going, if that makes sense.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
because like even for me as an environment artist, I kind of got like I got introduced to Unreal in my third year, and I had basic understanding when I was in college, because I jump into university in my third year, so I wasn't in Alberta for the 4 years, and like I was able to kind of have a grasp of a bit of everything, if that makes sense. However, there was certain things that I had like no idea of. Like for example, if I go into Unreal just now, I'm gonna be like, what the hell? Because like it's just not something that's like ingrained in my mind, if that makes sense.
Totally. No,
But
I'm the same.
like when it comes to obviously like software and stuff, like there's all these different materials that I guess you guys need to learn. But when it comes to like the teaching side of things, like that's also like the other debate is like, because there's so many software to learn, like what ones are the priority. So when it comes to like universities, like what is there like any common ones that you've realized that you think all universities need?
For audio design,
Yeah, for like audio.
um, well, particularly game audio, I think software like Wise by Audio Kinetic, they're like it's like a middleware
Okay.
engine, so you don't need to really fiddle around with like the Unity sides, but you can basically build an entire music system within Wise, and then like hook it up to your Unity project, which is a fantastic tool. Like as far as like recording software goes, I think it's quite it's one of those things where if you're comfortable with it, it's probably all right. I hear a lot of people using Audacity, which is always gives me a bit of
a bit of a heart attack.
Yeah. I've always favored Cubase, which is a great recording software. Obviously, I think the pro standard is Pro Tools.
I've heard Pro Tools. Yeah, I've heard Pro Tools.
Yeah. I like Cubase because it's got a lot of you can do both music really well and sort of sound design really well within it.
Wait, how do you spell it? Ubase, is it?
Cubase.
Oh, right. Okay.
C-U-B-A-S-E.
What I could do as well is, if you're okay with it, Mike, is that I could start maybe adding a few links at the end of the podcast.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I could introduce, just in case anyone's new to audio, and we can use that kind of like as a base just to share it with everyone, basically.
Sure,
So
that's a good idea.
when it comes to these softwares, are they, like, for example, like the main things such as like sound design, music composition, and like audio integration, do they like cover all these things, or is there like a main sort of focus for these softwares?
They basically cover it. I think like Wise is strictly integration. You
Okay.
can't like make sounds in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great sort of middleman between the audio guy and the finished game,
Awesome.
or like the engine. But no, I think Cubase, Pro Tools, Reaper is really good. It's kind of new. You can't go wrong with them.
Okay.
They offer quite decent pricing as well,
Awesome.
subscription models and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, because that can obviously sometimes be like a big debate when it comes to like the prices and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Cool.
on to the next question. That covers awesome, great topics. Nice one.
Nice.
So as always, like the next question, obviously of the big four, is like, did university teach you how to be ready for the industry as a audio artist?
I'm gonna say yes and no.
Okay.
'Cause
Cool.
I don't want to diss Evertay at all. I'd say yes on the technical side, but maybe not, or at least like my third and fourth year part was pretty much focused on you as an individual, like developing your skills and like what do you want to do. But I'm past halfway through my master's course right now.
Oh, awesome. Good on you.
Cheers. Yeah, still hanging in there.
Still surviving.
Yeah, and that completely covers the other aspect, which is how do you become industry ready? And it turns out like it is a completely different skill set.
Right.
The stuff we learned in third and fourth year was like just the basic technical stuff. But what this master's course does is it's like, okay, you can do things technically, but can you work professionally, and can you be that team member? And that's where it kind of mean where I'd wished I had a bit more team experience, because I mean that's what employers are looking for. I think is they can assume you do the technical stuff well, but when it comes down to it, they want to be able to work with you and not go mad. You know?
Yeah, it's like a how can I say it? Just like you as a person, and like just being like a good person. It sounds so cliche and so obvious, but
it does. It really does.
Like you'd be so surprised though, like how many people are actually hard to work with, or like people who like they have this ego, and you're just wondering like, dude, like what the heck? It's like it's not hard to be nice. Like obviously, like we all have like we need feedback and we need constructive feedback, but there's that balance. Like obviously, like you need to be pushed to kind of know where your limits are at and stuff, and know where you can go as a person. However, it's like it should always be easy to just be a nice person. And it's like when it comes to like you're saying about teamwork and working on teamwork and understanding like the industry through your masters, like it's vital. But it's like we said earlier, it'd be nice to introduce those things early on, I guess. Like obviously, speaking of the masters, it was actually one of the questions I was going to actually ask you outside the main questions, because my side of like the whole debate about the master's degree when it comes to like, for example, environment art and concept art and stuff, like I feel it's not important, because I think it's important in the sense that say when you finish fourth year you're still undecided. I think it maybe helps in terms of just doing something just to help you move along, I guess.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like environment art and concept art, it's very like they're so highly dependent on your portfolio skill set. They're like, right, does this dude or guy are they at the right skill set, and can they can they draw, like for example, when it comes to audio, like do they have like appreciation, understanding of Foley? Can they composite well? Into audio integration, all these different things. Like it's purely portfolio based, if that makes sense. So like when it came to the masters, I was very kind of like there was no point for me, but it's the complete opposite for you, which is great to hear.
Like touching on the portfolio thing, we had a portfolio module last semester, and yeah, like you say, as a artist, as an audio person, you are as good as your portfolio to an employer.
Yep.
And they do not waste time when they look at them. You need to hook them fast.
Yeah.
So, what the masters has done for me quite well has been like in-depth teaching of how do you make that as effective as possible, which is really cool actually. Like one of the things that encouraged us to do was to reach out to industry pros and just get dialogues going.
Okay.
And I was so surprised. Maybe it's just an audio thing because we're rare, but I was so surprised at how many people were willing to speak back. Like,
wow, right, okay.
I had
Awesome.
it was great, man. I was speaking to Bjorn Jacobson,
Okay.
who was the senior sound designer that did CD Projekt Red's next Cyberpunk game.
Oh wow,
He's
right.
in a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, he's such a nice dude. I'll give a shout out to his YouTube channel, Kujo Sound. It's got a lot of cool audio tutorials. But
Awesome. I'll make sure to include it in the description.
yes, but yeah, so we were encouraged to speak to people and get feedback on our portfolios. So we were getting like critiqued by pros as to how our portfolio should look, and which is great. I mean, that is that is our only tool to be employed as like artists, I suppose. So
Definitely.
that kind of stuff was invaluable. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing as well, because like I'm not sure if this is if you've probably watched it. I can't remember the name for some reason, but for some reason I was watching audio portfolio reviews. So this was about a year ago, and I was it was like a Twitch. I think it was actually a Twitch. It was on Twitch.
I know. Yeah, I think I've watched them as well.
And the guys were like basically doing like reviews on all like how to lay things out so it makes it easier for you to listen to the sounds.
Yeah.
And it's like there was all these different breakdowns on how to set up your portfolio for audio hours. And like I don't know why I was watching it, but it was really cool. It was awesome to watch. Like it was like a completely different perspective. Like the key was like obviously efficiency is important and making sure it's so easy to use. But like one of the main things I realized that a lot of audio artists were making the mistake of was like having just like thousands of sounds.
And, like a library of just random sounds.
And it was just like you could just tell they just didn't have the patience to be like, right, I have to listen to all this. Whereas if you just be very precise and consistent and highlight like the ones that like describe you the most, and like you'll know better than me, but it's like you want it to be clear, concise, and efficient, basically.
Yeah. No. And like to go back to what you were saying earlier, like you need that visual as well, because like sure your sound's okay, but is it depicting what it's meant to be representing in a visual sense, which is a huge thing that people look for. Like, so yeah, I think that's don't be just giving a dump of
of everything.
Media. Yeah, it's not what no one's going to sit through that. Number one, and number two, there's no actual context to it, so it might be good or it might be terrible for what it's meant to be representing. So just the connection between that audio and visual is incredibly important.
Because like when you're saying there also like about the visual side of things, like that was also on the Twitch stream as well. It's basically like basically somebody's obviously got like either an animation of a clip or whatever it is, and they've had to integrate the music as like best as possible, basically. And like choosing like the right visuals as well plays like a huge part. Like having like nice visuals to work with, so it makes your audio sound even better, plays a big part when it comes to, I guess, creating up your show reel and stuff.
No, totally, man. It's
awesome. So obviously we've covered like the first two questions. The third one is, so what were the benefits of going to university? So like what were the main advantages that you got from going to university?
Apart from like learning whys and stuff, 100% the biggest benefit is just meeting people. Because like you never know who you're sitting next to. Like they could go on to do fantastic things. And like that's one thing highlighted in the portfolio module was like networking. just being around people. Like, because like with the internet, there's no excuse for not being able to learn something, because you can literally look anything up and learn it if you so wish. But it all comes back to this teamwork thing. We can't like learn that online. You need to be thrown in with people. You need to build something as a team, and that for me was the most valuable thing. Even though I wish I had done more. Well, I think that's why I wish I had done more, because like right now I'm just realizing how valuable that is. Yeah, just meeting people. It's like it's fun to build games.
Exactly, and that's at the day that that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason you do it at the end of the day, is to make games, to make sounds that you enjoy, and be a part of that environment that is what you want to do. So yeah, that's awesome. So obviously, as always, I've always had this whole debate on the podcast between, I guess, like online material and like student education. And obviously, we've both went the university route, in which we've been taught by lecturers and so forth, and we've had, I guess, we've been taught a certain way, so we're not as, like, we haven't been taught through like online courses as much. So one of the questions that I always ask on the podcast is, like, have you had any like I guess good experiences with online courses, and like what, like, have you had to choose between online courses versus university? Like, what route would you advise people to do?
It's a really good question. I mean, personally, I'd advise going to university. It's like I said, there was that, like, meeting and working with people is a whole other skill set. Like, you need to learn how to work as a team.
Yeah.
But at the same point, like, online courses are fantastic. I mean, I've been taking a few on like coding and programming, because again, like, audio implementation kind of, you can do way more cool things with audio on the implementation side than you can do creating assets sometimes. So I've been taking like Pluralsight lessons on Unity and C# and stuff.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting Pluralsight, because that's part of Albert A's education system as well. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we've all had that advert on YouTube where it's the guy being like, coding for games is easier than you think. Like, that kind of stuff's great, I think. But I think you just need to be aware that what that teaches you isn't necessarily what will be required of you in industry, because you need that teamwork stuff, which I mean, there might be some online courses for teamwork, but I don't think anything beats the real thing.
Yeah, it's a bit harder to kind of interact through. Like, for example, I did a online course called Animation Mentor. I'm not sure if you ever heard of it, but it's a Disney online animation school, and
cool.
I had like the privilege to be taught by these Disney animators when I was in first and second year, and like, it was an awesome experience, but it's completely different, because like obviously I was talking to them through Google Hangout, and it's not quite the same as obviously doing it like in-house, like actually around a team. Like, obviously when it comes to like online courses and stuff, I'm not sure, like, is there any like main things, like websites and stuff, that's helped you as an audio artist? Like, what's your go-to sort of like material for, like, right, I need to maybe utilize this to help me get better?
I'd say YouTube, to be honest, man.
Yeah,
Like,
cool.
like, because there's no shortage of people teaching you how to do anything on there. But I mean, it depends how specific you can get. Like, I think I'll refer to, like, rather than maybe look at courses, I'll probably refer to like the online manuals of the software I need, and just read through it, go through that. But I think like YouTube is a fantastic and quick way to just see something else doing it and understand quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't want to like discredit any online courses. I'm sure they're much better than YouTube, but
I think it's just like the only debate though when it comes to online courses is like the money aspect, and like obviously we all have to like pay your part to get where you need to go, but like there's that sort of like debate to like how much is too much, if that makes sense, when it comes to money.
Sure.
And make sure you're not obviously getting taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Like the big pet peeve I have is like when it comes to online courses is basically, for example, like a few courses I've done, is basically what the system is that they have like they'll say, right, £500 per month, and you'll get 1 hour per week per feedback, and then all the rest will be like certain like video recorded tutorials. And
Right.
like the biggest disadvantage with that, and it'll be the same thing for like audio, is that like that's 1 hour of basically getting like the questions answered that you need in order to learn, and that doesn't help anybody. And
No.
like
Yeah.
like you can obviously watch, like for example, like my go-to tutorials is a thing called Gnomon, and basically that's how I've learned my environment art process. Obviously I'm paying a certain amount of money, but I know what I'm getting from it, if that makes sense. And I'm
Yeah.
getting like proper like knowledge. Like I'm not getting like your typical, oh, this is how you do, like for example, if you're creating a sound, you don't want to just learn how to create sound. You want to understand how, like why you're creating that sound, what it's going to evoke, like the actual
Yeah.
like meaning
Yeah.
behind the sound. And
Totally, man. Totally.
and like when it comes to like that's why I said like it'll be awesome if we can talk about just music in games, like music in films and stuff, and
Mm.
like it's a whole other area to discuss and how important it is. Because
Sure, man.
like when I'm creating, like for example, I said to you before we started the podcast, I'm making this training environment at the moment, and one of the things I was talking to Mike about before it was the other day was about how I really liked his audio, and how like it kind of it was very evocative in terms of it told a story. It kind of almost gave me that feeling of like hyping up the art piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Cheers, man.
well, that's what you want, man. Like that's what
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
the
Totally.
art piece like so like badass. Like without audio, the artwork, like obviously it's a skill and a half. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like if you can like create like a story and show like your passion in one image, great. Like that's awesome. Like that's amazing. However, when you add like for example like I'll talk to you about it afterwards. Like for example like how to like just give it like that extra impact. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
That's
it plays such a good part.
No, I think it's like, I think sound design is the condiment to a really good sandwich. Like, you don't necessarily need it
Hmm.
to in some places, but when it's there, it brings it to like this whole other level.
Definitely.
You know, um, it's an interesting point you made just back there about being wary of these online courses and
Hmm.
understanding what it is they're teaching, because I think it's important to bring up where, and there was an article about this a couple of months ago on Game Industry Biz
Okay.
where they were talking about because I mean a lot of people are making a business out of selling the idea that we can teach you how to become a games developer.
Hmm.
It's a very attractive thing. It's a very attractive job. It's a fun one. People want to get in that job, and I think there's a lot of courses out there that almost take advantage of that,
Hmm.
and they sort of disguise, or they teach you the technical aspects, but not the how to get actually employed aspects,
Yeah,
which I think
definitely.
is something to be wary of, for sure.
Like I think like, that's also like a scary thing in the sense like that's what I said to you earlier in terms of like so the reason why I do this podcast is to literally get the truth out basically, and
Mm.
to get people on the right track, because I hate this whole idea of like I'm pretty sure you've came across it yourself, but like a lot of artists, so I assume it's the same for audio, but everyone's very secretive. Like
Yes, yeah,
they hold so much things back. Like I'm not gonna lie,
mm.
I used to be very um methodical with who I shared my artwork with,
Sure.
in terms of my skill knowledge. If that makes any sense, not to be a douche, but I learned to stop doing that. If that makes sense, I learned that it's important to start just sharing things, because you grow as an artist so much quicker. And
Absolutely.
like it's so frustrating when somebody's like, right, I'll teach you the technical aspect. However, I'm not going to tell you any reasons why you're doing it this way. And I'm
Yeah.
like what? Like what's the point of me learning? It's like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what are you actually teaching then?
yeah, it's like there's no sort of like theory behind it. And I think that's like when it comes to portfolios, like obviously like when it comes to like what we're going to talk about when it comes to like the art side of things, like we'll talk about audio and art, but like if you don't know what to include in your portfolio, or like the reasoning behind everything that you've done, like you have no chance of getting a job,
Yeah.
or at least
No,
no understanding of where to go. I'm not sure what your points, what you think of that, but
no, I completely agree. And again, I keep on going back to this portfolio module, but it
mhm.
it covers a lot of these topics.
Yeah,
And one of them is like, yeah, what is this portfolio piece's place in your like what are you trying to say with this piece?
yeah,
Like, because a portfolio shouldn't just be a gallery of all your work. Like, if you're like you for like number one, you need to target a specific company.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you need to understand who's most likely to look at that portfolio,
Yeah.
and then that's when you shape it all so it's directed straight to that target, and it's gonna like you've got more chances of it hitting because you can't just put like quality over quantity all the way for a portfolio.
Definitely.
Um,
So are
and
you?
like
Oh, on you go. Continue.
no, I was just trailing off there, so go for
No,
it.
no, I was just gonna say. So like when it comes to audio, is like how important is like range of skill set versus understanding exactly, like say for example you said there, like kind of narrowing down like what you want to do. Like
Mm.
I think there's a balance in between both of them.
Yeah, see, I think it's quite difficult because like we might get into this later, but I think in some places there's a almost confused perspective of what the audio guy is meant to do.
Okay.
I think that like game audio is seen as like this sort of general job,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's way more specialized. Like you could have a guy who all he does is the implementation, like manage the whys. You could have a guy all he does is cut up audio really really well. Like there's so many layers to what it means to be a sound person.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you say, you need to focus on that one and have that portfolio piece be the one part of it.
So would you,
But
is it better to specialize then, or is it better to like, so would you say, because like obviously when it comes to like environment art, um well, this is the issue. This is why when I said like we just literally discussed it, is that like so many people are very secretive like to what they want. Like when it
yeah,
comes to like portfolio requirements, nobody really ever says exactly what they want, if that makes sense. Like they always say it's like the quality, and because obviously these studios have to base it off what projects they're working on at the time, your artwork might not work for them right now, if that makes sense.
sure.
So it's like
No,
it's a catch-22 and a whole like problem that I think this industry's still trying to, it's not still, it is still trying to resolve, I guess. It's like for example, like we're saying there, when it comes to audio, it's like, well, what do I make to get into the studio? Like obviously, like you can like tailor it to something like for example, like 4J Studios. For example, 4J Studios is very well known for Minecraft, and
yes,
that's where Mike works at the moment. So for example, if Mike was like, right, so I need to gather audio for Minecraft, like I'm not sure how it does, but for example, if actually that'll be a good subject to talk about. Like, say for example, like, could you give an example of like what you did to get at 4J, if you're allowed to, if there's anything you're allowed to like talk about there?
sure. Um, yeah, sorry, my audio stopped recording for some reason.
It's
There
cool,
we
dude.
go.
That's fine.
um, sorry, it's moving about a bit.
Not a problem at all.
Cool. So I have to thank Abertay for that because really, as I think as part of the master's course, they're always looking to see what placements they can put us on.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken, the lecturer there, he basically hooked that up. We had he reached out to 4J, to David at 4J, and they set up like an audio redesign test,
Awesome.
which is cool. It's the first time I've like done one of those. So they gave us like a silent clip.
Okay.
It's maybe about 2 minutes long, and we had to just put audio to it. And somehow I was the one that they picked, which was
Perfect.
amazing.
Nice.
Yeah,
Congrats, man. Good on you.
yeah, thank you. Uh, so yeah, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was that easy because a lot of work went into understanding or like building those skills, but I still can't really believe that I'm there, if I'm being honest.
Well, that's the thing though. You've clearly highlighted you've got the skill set, and at the end of the day, it's like sometimes all it takes is one piece of artwork or audio for people to be convinced. And I think
Yeah,
this is also like when it comes to the big debate of like what do you include, and like Mike said, less is more. Like sometimes like if you can prioritize the quality first, then you're increasing your chances significantly over others because of just the quality in general.
yeah,
And I think that's when, I guess, knowing where you like want to go is so important, because like I understand it's a big question to ask, like what do I want to do for the rest of my life, But
Oh yeah, it's almost impossible sometimes to answer that.
yeah, it's such a big question, and I think that's when people have to start realizing it's important just to break it down into steps and acknowledge, right, so I want to get, say for example, I'm in your shoes, Mike, and I'm like, right, I want to go to 4J Studios. Then you just go, well, what kind of art or audio do they look for? And what other people have they hired? And is there anything maybe I could utilize from them? And that's when what Mike was saying earlier about teamwork comes into play and networking, because if, like, say for example, if Mike didn't, for example, I'm pretty sure you had to ask Ken to at least involve yourself to get this sort of opportunity to do this test. Like, it takes you as a person to put yourself out there to get involved in order to get anywhere, and
Yeah,
that's
totally.
that's the networking aspect. So it's like obviously there's a lot of different things that we're covering here, but like all these things play a big part into getting yourself noticed. So don't always think scale. Like scale's important sometimes because it shows range, but it's not a necessity if it's not at the right standard.
Sure. I think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of the person who has to like go through all of these.
Mm-hmm.
Like think about how much time it would take to look through hundreds of portfolios, and go through every little. Like you need to understand that these people are looking to be hooked quick,
Yep.
and the best way to do so is again, have like make it targeted, like understand who's looking at it, because it's a hard thing to stand out. I mean, I'm sure it's more so actually for people like yourself with environmental artists. I mean,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of competition out there.
Definitely.
Like, and how do you stand out?
Like,
Which is it's tough. It's tough to answer, man. Like it's
well, that's the thing. I think like for example, the main thing I've learned when it comes to just being a creative, the one thing I've always trusted in is like hard work, but also patience. And through patience, I've been able to acknowledge, right, like I have to acknowledge like the truth. Like, so where am I at the moment? So you as an audio artist, so whoever, if you're listening and you're an audio artist, you have to understand, right, generally, like, am I actually okay? Am I good? Am I bad? Where do I lie at the moment in comparison to where I need to get? And until you can understand being true with yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. Like, you need to understand like the reality of things, because at the end of the day, it's an industry that like you're making money, and people want like the best you possible, and they want to be able to trust you. And if they don't have that, like if they're not convinced when they're looking at your portfolio, like it's like what Mike just said, it's like they only have so much seconds to maybe listen to a few clips, and if they're not convinced, they're just gonna like swipe you on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the funny things about that we got told was like don't be like say you click on you give a link to your portfolio site, they click on it. The first thing they should see shouldn't be a picture of you, because like
Well, really,
that,
right? Okay.
yeah,
God
yeah,
damn, right? Okay.
yeah, because like that already says quite a few things. Like you're maybe putting the message out there that like you want to show yourself before you even show your work, which an employer doesn't care about. Like they need to be able to click on that and immediately listen to you. And if they're interested,
yeah.
they'll hang out on your site more, they'll delve a bit deeper.
Yeah.
And then you earn the right to tell to tell them about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like
I've never
well,
thought about that. No, on you go. That's awesome. Keep going.
no, like well, you do need to promote yourself as this like person who's easygoing and nice, and a picture goes a long way for that kind of stuff, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, like the first thing they should see should be like, wow, look at this guy. Like they should immediately get your work before they've seen anything else.
Yeah.
Like you really, I mean, you've maybe got like 10 seconds to hook them.
Yeah.
So don't waste that time with a picture of you and your dog or whatever. Like it's nice to have, but this just goes. I mean, to be fair, I mean, if you're approaching say like a small indie company,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing might be better, because they're looking for they're not just looking for a cog in the machine like a AAA studio might. They're looking for like a person. So that kind of stuff goes quite a long way. But
Definitely.
again, it goes back to knowing who you're targeting against, or who is actually going to look at it.
That's just crazy because I never thought about it that way, because like obviously like another big one alongside like what you just said there is like having too much text, like having too much like too much writing instead of actually like the actual craft itself. Because like one of the main things I've always preached on the podcast is that, like for example, too many people watch too many tutorials rather than actually doing the craft itself, and it should always be the portfolio first. Like obviously, what we've discussed so far in regards to teamwork and stuff, like that's essential. But Mike's just literally just highlighted there, like at the end of the day, it's like the audio has to stand out, and if you only have a few seconds to grasp their attention, then like that's where all your focus goes when it comes to portfolio. Like even the small things, like I'm not sure how important when it comes to your website and stuff, but like for audio artists, does visuals matter when it comes to like how you lay things out in terms of like just like the whole like presentation?
Yeah. Because I mean, like I think a portfolio is two things. It's like one, it's like a body of work, but if it's like an online portfolio, it's a website, so it needs to feel good. Like we're very conditioned now. With websites, like when you see a really old website that's all crappily laid out, it's quite off-putting, and it feels wrong. So like that's actually a surprising aspect that I hadn't considered either. The portfolio needs to be a great website. Like it needs to be easy to navigate. It can't be cluttered. Like no one wants to read walls of text. So that's a huge part actually. I think that sort of Twitch, I think it's called Real Talk. Is that the one you watched?
It's like a guy. I'm trying to think. There's like a few guys on it normally. Like there's like I don't remember. Let me just write it down because I'm gonna check out it later. Real Talk, you said, yeah?
Real Talk. I think it's I think the channel is called something else, but the actual stream is called Real Talk.
Because like that was so beneficial.
It's great, isn't it? It's because he will slam. He's not shy to just tell you how crap your portfolio. And that's an important thing too, where like you were saying earlier, you need to leave your ego behind for these things. You need to criticism is like bad or like positive feedback is kind of useless, but criticism is invaluable. You need to just sort of go straight into it and get an understanding of what you're actually good at. And putting it out there is the best way.
Because I think so many people, like this is a thing when it comes to the education system that I think is wrong in a sense, in terms of, I personally wish we had more people who are actually, like for example, we were lucky when we were at Abertay, like we had a lot more than what your usual place has when it comes to like industry experts, but I still think there still needs to be a bigger push to having people who are up to date with the current trends. So when it comes to audio artists, having people who like or at least even if it's not having teachers, but having more interactions with actual studios themselves. But I understand like that is like maybe a lot to ask for a studio, but at least having like more guest speakers of like getting the reality out there more. Like it's so important. Like
I completely agree.
Because like obviously like there's a lot of things that you can do like yourself. Like obviously you can research and stuff, but the biggest contradiction with the internet is the fact that everyone has different opinions, and then you're like, well, what the hell do I do? There's so much going on. I have no idea what to do. And like
you can find yourself in a hole pretty quick with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Of conflictions and just it's tough.
So the next thing that I want to bring up when it comes to the podcast is, I guess, the creative side of things. Like obviously we've been talking about it as we go along, but there's a few things that I'm not aware of, and it'd be pretty cool to listen about. So one of the passions that you one of the things that you love is like procedural audio in games. And then like writing music, and then there's one really interesting thing that I have no idea what you're going to say about this, but it'd be really cool to hear about it. Like, what is algorithmic music? Like, tell me about this beast of a name, because like for me it sounded like the actual company themselves, Algorithmic, who do like texturing and stuff.
Okay, right.
So is this like a different beast? Like, what is this?
yeah, so this was kind of the focus of my fourth year project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh yeah, I could talk about this for hours, so be ready.
Okay,
um,
I'll just be
um,
quiet. I'll just let you speak.
but I think that as the game industry has grown,
Mm-hmm.
I think the focus has been on developing the visuals. Like the thing, like when the next console is always released, it's always like, oh, look how good the graphics are, look how good the thing. Like that's the bar
Mm-hmm.
generally. And I mean, for the most part, audio has stayed the same for quite a long time, from like the lifespan of the industry. And I think only now is it starting to pick up a bit.
Okay.
And procedural audio is a really interesting part of that, where you don't like there is no recording of a sound. I mean, it could be a little bit, but like the idea is that you. Oh God, it's hard to explain.
Take your time, man.
Yeah, it's like
I've hit you with a big question. You're just like,
you
God
did,
damn,
you
what do
did.
I do now?
I know. Well, I'll talk about algorithmic music because that's easier for me to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like the whole process behind my honors piece was, could you give a composition tool to a developer who has no idea about music? So how it worked was, I only built a prototype. It never became as amazing as I'd envisioned it to be, but you would sort of give it a mood, and it would just on the fly compose music for you, like
Right.
in engine. Like there was no audio samples or recordings. I used a program called Pure Data, which is a really old, dated visual programming thing.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things it does is like live audio processing. So you could like generate a sine wave and manipulate that wave in real time. So again, it's not recorded. You're not listening to a playback. It's literally being like conceived frame by frame.
Right.
So my whole algorithm music thing was you could just start the music, and then when you wanted to for it to change, you just tell it to change, like slow down but make it a bit more happier, and it would generate this thing in real time. um,
So like literally links it up to like what you're making. So it's like it changes as like for example like the story and the scenes going along basically.
yeah, it's kind of it's
Wow.
almost
Right. Okay.
I compare it to like a like back in the day when they had black and white film projectors. You had a guy
Yeah.
sitting there on the piano like reacting. That's what it's like.
Right. Okay.
um,
Awesome. No. Very nice. Very cool.
it's like a live aspect as opposed to pre-recorded.
So it's like
um,
a live performance. So as the things go on, like he's obviously playing along with what he sees.
yeah.
Oh wow. Awesome.
I think I know I just read about this recently where the reason they did that was because the projector was so noisy. They had to cover up with something.
Oh right. Okay.
and and that was actually how music became a part of film, was to make the projector like
Really.
to drown that noise out, to
Gee
not
whiz.
distract people. You had like a little guy there on the piano just sort of masking it, and it stuck, which was really cool.
No, that's an
um
awesome way. That's a unique. I would never have thought that. Gee whiz. Right. Okay.
yeah. So yeah, like procedural audio, because it goes to sound design as well, because it allows you, rather than recording a whole bunch of crap to sort of anticipate what could happen,
Mm-hmm.
you could maybe manipulate one audio file in different ways based on the game engine. And that's probably how I define procedural audio. It's like it happens on the fly in real time. It's not
Yeah.
accounted for, but you can sort of like hook it up and let the players let the player's input be what modifies that sound.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
It's
Definitely.
hard to explain.
It's kind of like a more, I wouldn't say risky, but it sounds a bit more creative. Like it sounds
Hmm.
more ambitious.
Yeah.
But it makes it more fun as well because you don't know what to expect.
Yeah, there's
Um,
an element of randomness there as well. It's not
yeah,
really the same every time. You're not being like, I'm sure you've all had a game where you just like hear one sound and you're so sick
yeah.
of it.
I
um,
yeah. Like that's the thing as well. When it comes to sound, I think the hardest thing, like I'm pretty sure you agree with it, but it's like making sure that everything is not what you expect. So like making sure that like the next sound that's going to come along is going to be like, oh wow, I did not expect that, and then like a change of emotion happens, a change of mood overall, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's like a that's one like really cool things about audio in games is like it's easy to compare to film actually
Mm-hmm.
because I think the game standard is often quite compared to film in terms of what it looks and feels like.
Yep.
But there's a huge difference for audio because if you're scoring music or if you're adding sound to a film, really like the image is done. You can predict it. It's not going to change. It's all like it's you've got this like linear timescale to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But in a game, anything can happen at different points. It's all over the place. You can't anticipate everything.
Yep.
So what happens is you need to build these like audio systems that that can work with like real time input and like it's a complicated thing. And I think that's quite overlooked in sound design is like the actual programming and integration part where
Like how you get everything together, basically.
yeah, like how do you possibly account for everything that could happen?
Because it's like what you said earlier. It's a lot of people who don't maybe, I guess, know audio as much, keep thinking that happens at the end,
Yeah.
and so one of the things I'm pretty sure I said it earlier. So one of the things I do all the time is so when I'm working, do my environment work, I'm constantly listening to movie soundtracks. So I listen to movie soundtracks literally every day. It's just a thing that I love to do. Like for example, yesterday I was listening to the God of War soundtrack,
Oh,
and
nice.
oh, what a game! Oh my god, it's
Oh my God. Yeah.
best game of last year. It's still well, it was that and Uncharted, and then Red Dead. That was just like, yep, we
Yeah,
are
Red
sorted.
Dead's. I
Those
know.
those are
I
the
remember.
games to go to.
So good.
But
Yeah. No, that's something that they do very well is like that balance of and that sort of communication between visual and audio.
mhm.
Like when it's done well, that's what it looks like.
Do
You know what I
you?
mean? Like
Sorry,
sorry, go on.
I'm not trying to cut you off, but it's like, do you think audio is very sort of like for example, this is the same thing for lighting in artists. People don't appreciate lighting when it's like when it's really good because they can't tell if it's bad. Do you think that's the same sort of mindset when audio? Like, do you think people just expect good audio? Like they just
Yeah.
yeah
No, totally. I think quite often it's said that if you're doing your job correctly, they shouldn't like notice it,
yeah
which kind of sucks, but it's totally
yeah
true.
like because like, that's the crazy thing because who was it I was listening to? So I was learning obviously about lighting. Oh yeah, so I was watching a bunch of tutorials about lighting, and the guy kept saying it's so obvious to tell when someone's like done lighting wrong, and it just ruins everything. But then nobody appreciates it when it's done right, and it's
Yeah,
and
no,
it
it's the exact same for audio, I think.
because like when it comes to audio, it's like it's a whole other like beast, and like that's why I have like full respect for what you guys do. Like that's when I was working with you in Disney, I was just like the stuff you were making, it was like it was badass. It was really cool, and it's like it changes the whole mood of the game instantly.
Yeah,
And
no, it
there's
does, isn't it? It's weird.
like there's so many different things that we can talk about it. I'm just trying to think. So we've covered like a lot of different topics, and it's awesome been having you on. I'm just wondering, is there anything that you personally think you would like to share when it comes to just music and audio as a whole? Is there anything that you think it'd be nice to share, or
Um, I'd say like if I'd say like don't underestimate the tool that is audio when you're a game developer, because I
mm-hmm,
think that like if I'm the audio guy on a game team, I can only do so much. If the game designer understands what can be done with audio, that goes a huge way. Like that's I think the communication between game designer and the audio guy.
mm-hmm.
I don't want to keep on saying the audio guy, but like
No,
we
no, I
totally are
understand.
the audio guy. That's a huge thing, and I
Yeah,
think you'd be doing any sound guy a favor if you sort of took their role seriously
mm-hmm,
and understood like what audio in games is actually all about, as opposed to it being the post production bit that we put on at the end.
So, like when it comes to audio, is there anything that artists can do to make, like for example, if you're an environment artist or artist listening to the podcast, like what could we do to that also helps you? Like, is there anything, like obviously the involvement is important, but is there anything like for example, when we did the Disney project, me and you, like we noticed that, like for example, if the riggers weren't doing the rigging right, the animation slowed down dramatically. So
Sure.
it's that back and forth between them working together. But is there anything that like the other groups can do that makes it easier for audio artists, or is that
Um,
quite a difficult one?
I mean, I think it's yeah. Apart from just talking to them, I think that's the most important part. It's just
Okay.
like to remember you're as a team, you're all involved in this cool creative process,
Hmm.
and um, I might think of some audio thing that inspires you to do something cool with the environment, or vice versa. I think like making it part of the creative process, which is true for all departments actually, not just
Yeah.
audio, but I think like um, yeah, just talk, be creative with each other, think of
Because
some cool stuff.
awesome. Because like there's one thing I've always wished. So of all the projects I've worked on, like there's one question I wish I could like get answered. Imagine we started like a game in that by purely just listening to a bunch of sounds. Like imagine you could be like, right, the audio artist is going to dictate the story in terms of, boom, we'll just start off with, like it'll be something like a different take on it, if that makes sense. Or
Yeah.
in terms of it allow us, and like that's why I said to you earlier, it'd be great if environment artists started thinking about music in their pieces. Like obviously, it's not a necessity. Obviously, it's not required when it comes to portfolio. Like they're not going to be like, right, we need this audio to match up with your art piece. It's just not a requirement when it comes to portfolio for environment artists. However, it'd be pretty cool to have like people kind of like in their showreel having this more like story, like say for example my train, like and then I was like, right, Mike, smoke sound effects or like sound in the background, just noise, and like highlighting that in your showreel, like for environment artists, if that makes sense. Like that would be
Yeah,
like a
I mean,
really cool sort of like, at least you're showing like appreciation or like some sort of understanding of something different.
no, that's such a good point because as an employer, I'd see that not only are you a fantastic environment artist, but you've actually thought about how it would fit into a game with other departments.
Hmm.
And I think like yeah, I think audio for that kind of stuff would be a great way to make the old portfolio pop out and sort of stand out.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's where
totally, man.
like
Yeah.
that's where the collaborative comes in. Like for example, imagine, like I'm not sure, like for example when you're doing portfolio, like for example, imagine I gave you my train, right? So say I gave you
Mm-hmm.
like a train render, or say like for example when I gave you the Disney, like when I was doing the Disney project, so I gave you the bunker, and then on your show reel you showed the bunker, which like you've already got this, but I'm just like pretending,
Sure.
like so you've got the
Sure.
bunker, and then that's like you also showing like like a good visuals as well, like decent visuals. So
Mm.
you're making your website look more presentable because you've got the visuals there. Plus, you've got the audio
Sure.
to make
Yeah.
it more badass. So you're sorted.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, because it's we're in the entertainment business,
Hmm.
so it needs to be somewhat entertaining
Yeah,
what you're showing, right?
awesome.
Totally. I remember when I think you showed me and Jordan your Martian hub
Yeah, yeah.
or what's it called? And we were like, oh my god, like why can't I do sound to that? Like because that was brilliant, man. Like
Thanks.
I remember we were looking at it and it's like, or at least I was just scanning things and being like, oh, what would that make
Yeah,
sound wise?
like the
And like
doors and stuff.
yeah, you can like hear the whole soundscape from your image.
Well, that's the thing as well. So like, do you know when I made? So I made a video for that. So I'm not sure if you've seen the video. So I did like and like this is why like audio is so important to me. So I made like a environment sort of fly through of that scene. So I was like gathering sources from the movie itself and getting sound effects together to like try and like make it more cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the thing, like in portfolios that people really dig. Like they really like that sort of stuff because it's like you said, it tells a story. It's giving some sort of meaning behind it. It's not just a flat image now.
Yeah, no, totally. Like
Awesome.
some of the redesign stuff I've done, which is a good thing for other people to do
Hmm.
for a portfolio, is to like take like maybe a 10-second, 15-second long clip of a game you like, strip the sound, and then put your own sense in there to show that your audio can match the quality of these visuals and whatnot. And I always pick cinematic, like in-game cinematics, because it's just more entertaining to watch. It's like an easier thing to look at, than.
Awesome.
But no.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. That's I can't believe it's already been an hour.
Yeah, it's quick, man. I could talk about audio all day.
Like you said earlier, if you want to come on in the future, just let me know, and I'll we can maybe get a few guys on together and have like a bunch of us talking about audio. That'd be pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I want to shout out to my audio guys at uni, Corey, Jordan, and Stuart.
Awesome. I'll try and get them on as well. Or we just do like a team thing. As always, I always include the guests' links and so forth, so portfolio, everything that they've done. So I'll include Mike's work in the description below. If you're new, make sure to subscribe. It'll be much appreciated. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up. So make sure to like the video. And like I said earlier on about the art sharing, make sure to share your links in the description below. I'm mainly saying that to the people on YouTube because obviously it has a comment section. You can't do that on the other platforms, unfortunately. But do that; it'll be awesome. And as again, thanks Mike, and we will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.
I say thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Ross Baxter's YouTube channel for excellent tutorials and podcasts.